It is February 1943 in Dayton, Ohio. Snow is melting into gray water along the curbs, and the city functions on a rhythm of predictability. Global conflict is something that happens elsewhere, appearing only in newsreels and government paper. Inside a hardware store, a father argues with a customer about the price of nails. His 19-year-old son stands behind the counter, holding ordinary plans. He wants to save for a ring, marry his girlfriend after Christmas, and eventually take over the store. His life is defined by routine. His girlfriend, Ruth, gives him a photograph taken by the river, inscribed with 5 words, "Come home before the leaves change." It reflects a common civilian misunderstanding, the belief that war is a brief, manageable pause in an otherwise normal timeline. The mailman places an envelope on the counter, and the boy's ordinary future evaporates. He has 12 days to report for induction. In a single moment, his identity and agency are replaced by government instructions. Society promises a clean story of heroism and return. The reality is far more clinical. He is now government property, a component in a machine that does not account for rings, hardware stores, or the changing of the seasons. Basic training in Georgia is designed for erasure. The Army cuts his hair, takes his clothes, and replaces his name with a number. They teach him to obey commands before his mind has physical time to process a thought. Men adopt different survival strategies. Eddie Caruso from Brooklyn talks incessantly about his father's bakery, using the memory of sugar-dusted cannolis to block out the barracks. Sergeant Miller, a 27-year-old veteran of Sicily, remains quiet. He watches the men and tells the boy to watch the quiet ones. They're the ones who don't freeze when the shooting starts. They cross the Atlantic in a troop ship so crowded that men sleep in shifts. The air below deck tastes of oil and sweat. Every time the engines change speed, conversation stops. Everyone is waiting for the sound of a torpedo striking the hull. Fear, with no physical outlet, has nowhere to go. It builds inside the men, creating a psychological pressure that makes the eventual necessity of extreme action feel like a relief. At dawn on June 6th, the landing craft turns toward the French coast. Naval shells pass overhead, sounding like freight trains tearing through the sky. The sensory assault is absolute, stripping away any remaining sense of safety. The ramp falls, and the illusions of a heroic, clean story are cut down by machine gun fire. Men go over the side into chest-deep water, struggling against heavy packs and a doorway filled with bullets. Survival on this sand requires the total abandonment of the impulse to stop. When a soldier beside you reaches for his dropped helmet and is shot before his hand touches the water, you keep moving. Pausing for any reason makes you the next target. Standard military plans have been torn into pieces. Radios are destroyed, and tanks burn in the shallows. Men from different companies huddle behind steel obstacles, forced to find their own way forward through the wire. On the steep slope beyond the beach, they find Sergeant Miller. He is conscious, but bleeding from a fragment below the ribs. He pushes Eddie's silver cigarette case back into his hand, tells them to stop wasting dressings, and points uphill toward the guns. Miller had scratched a single word into that case: move. On Omaha Beach, this is the only law that matters. Momentum is the currency that buys survival. Staying still is a death sentence. Inland, the distinct front lines of the beach vanish into the claustrophobic danger of the Normandy hedgerows. Machine guns wait behind every thicket of roots and earth, and snipers fire once before disappearing into the greenery. The frantic pace keeps the mind occupied, but creates a secondary danger. It is only in the brief moments of stillness, when the boots stop moving, that the images of a German boy in a trench or a child hiding under a table begin to surface. Liberation is a messy, destructive process. While French civilians cheer the passing trucks, families are left digging through the ruins of homes destroyed by bombs. Victory and grief occupy the same street. Eddie is killed while sitting in a ditch, opening a tin of meat. There is no heroic charge, only a random artillery shell that lands behind the hedge and ends his life in a moment of mundane routine. As he dies, Eddie pushes the silver cigarette case toward his friend. The boy from Dayton now carries Ruth's photograph and the physical memory of 2 dead men. The weight in his pocket has tripled. He slides the case into his jacket and keeps walking. Continuous forward motion has become his only defense. As long as he stays moving, he can keep the reality of his losses at a distance. Germany surrenders in May 1945. The external war stops, and the men fire their guns in the air and find alcohol. But for the boy from Ohio, the internal engine is still running at combat speed. He returns to Ohio in the autumn. Ruth looks exactly like her photograph, and his family expects him to resume the life he left behind. They want the boy who stood behind the hardware counter, not the man who has seen the beach. The brain refuses to exit the survival loop. Ordinary peacetime sounds become weapons. A truck backfiring triggers the instinct to dive for cover, and the sound of rain against a roof becomes the metallic rattle of the landing craft ramp. At the hardware store, his father stacks boxes exactly as before. This sameness feels accusatory. The civilian world continued its mundane rituals without interruption, while he was fundamentally altered by the requirement to keep moving. The ultimate tragedy of his survival is that the very mechanism that kept him alive in France, the refusal to stop, is the thing that makes peacetime feel like a vacuum. Decades later, at 68, he returns to the beach with Ruth. The bluffs are covered in grass now, and the bunkers are empty. The geography of his trauma has become a place where children play in the sand. He stands near the site of the landings and takes out the artifacts: Ruth's faded river photograph and Eddie's scratched silver case. Miller's carving forced them through the surf and into the hedgerows. Now it serves a different purpose, a mandate to carry the memories of the fallen into the decades they were denied. He realizes that moving forward doesn't have to mean running away. He places the case in the sand and finally breaks the law of continuous motion. The heavy equipment is gone, and no one is pushing him now. He takes Ruth's hand, chooses his own direction, and walks away.